He's become known as France's most prolific paedophile, and now the former surgeon Joël Le Scouarnec has been sentenced to the maximum term of 20 years in jail. He admitted sexually abusing hundreds of patients, mostly children, between 1989 and 2014. It's the second high-profile sexual assault case in France in the last 6 months, after Dominique Pellico was also sentenced to 20 years in jail after repeatedly drugging and raping his wife Giselle for almost a decade and inviting dozens of strangers to rape her whilst she was unconscious. But the length of the sentence has left people questioning whether France is lagging behind other countries when it comes to condemning sexual assault. Here to discuss this with me is activist and campaigner Capucine Coudrier. Capucine, thank you very much for joining us. First of all, can you just clarify for us this 20 years sentence? That was the maximum that was able to be handed out, wasn't it? Because a lot of people in the UK are shocked by that.
Yes, that was the maximum because it's the pain, no, not the pain. The term that he can be condemned doesn't depend on the number of victims. So you can have committed rape against one or against hundreds of victims. It's the same maximum sentence that you can have.
I was just reading that had he been convicted in America, he would now be sentenced to or facing the possibility of 4,000 years in jail. What is your reaction to the sentence he has been given today?
I'm not particularly in favor of prison because it's far from being a miracle solution to problems of sexual abuse. But in the case of Le Scouarnec, he himself had said that he wanted to be in prison so he wouldn't make more victims. So with hundreds of victims, I don't think that he should be eligible for parole. And yes, 20 years doesn't seem to be a lot, but as it's the maximum he could have for this, I'm quite relieved that he got it.
You talk about him being possibly eligible for parole. People have crunched the numbers and said because of time served, it is feasible he could be out within 5 years. How do you react to that?
Well, I think that is problematic because, as I said, even if I don't always think that the prison is the best solution concerning crime of sexual abuse, Le Scouarnec himself said that he felt better being in prison than being outside because if he's outside, he will probably continue to rape other victims. So in Le Scouarnec case, I really don't understand how he can have parole with a mandatory minimum term of 2/3. I think it's very low.
If, in your opinion, prison isn't the answer, what is? Because in this country, we're certainly discussing other solutions, potentially chemical castration for one.
I'm not a legal expert, so it's hard to say. In my position as also a former victim of sexual abuse and as an activist, I think that the most important thing is that we need to radically change the way we deal with sexual and child abuse in our society by firstly stop looking the other way and stop making victims keep being silent and everything. We really have to move forward. And I don't know a lot about how we could condemn authors of sexual abuse, but I'm sure that the most important is to try and prevent these abuses to happen, and this is where we have the most important thing to do.
His victims were mostly children. They were boys and girls. The average age was 11. And one of the most shocking things was how many people in the hospitals, the countless hospitals he worked in, did look the other way. It is absolutely unbelievable that he was able to have access to these children. Presumably, they were alone with him, and many of them were sedated at the time. How is it possible that doctors and nurses and hospital staff chose, some of them, to look the other way? It's so shocking.
Yes, in fact, many of his colleagues knew that he had been convicted of possessing child pornography files in 2005, but the truth is that it didn't stop them from working with him, and it didn't stop Joël Le Scouarnec from being able to work in hospitals. So that is a huge scandal, but it's not shocking because it's always like that in the case of sexual violence in an institution or even in the family. People just close their eyes, they look the other way, they tell themselves that it's none of their business. So that's why I say that silence is the biggest problem facing a whole society.
The other aspect of this case that has surprised people in this country, and obviously surprised the surviving victims, because some of them killed themselves because of the abuse that they went through, is the lack of interest, lack of coverage of this case, especially in comparison to the Pellico trial. Why was that? We're talking about children here, and hundreds of children and young children who were under anaesthetic in many cases at the time. Why was it given such little coverage in comparison?
In the case of Pellico, we had a victim, Gisèle, who had become an icon thanks to her filing personality. She was the one who took center stage over the dozens of men who raped her. So she was very brave. And here it was the other way round. We had one attacker and hundreds of victims. The victims formed an anonymous mass, so their courage and their individuality was never told. It's very sad because we don't know much about them. And honestly, I also think that it's because they were children at the time, and sadly, children are much less regarded as important and legitimate victims. By the way, it's the same with Caroline, Gisèle and Dominique's daughter. She was also a victim of her father, but she received much less media attention.
Yeah, absolutely, in France and in other countries as well. Capucine Coudrier, thank you very much for your thoughts. Thank you for joining us, and good luck with the rest of your campaigning.
Thank you.